Hi, this is Mehdi,
Hey, this is Fran.
and this is Total Tactics Football. Crazy performance from Barcelona. They win 3-1 at the Nou Camp. Fran, how are you feeling about this game?
Look, it was a fantastic game from Barcelona. One of the classic performances where you get to see Messi free flowing and in action. And ultimately, it does come out of the fact that Napoli had to come into this game and score a goal. And as we mentioned in our preview, this Napoli side isn't good at keeping a clean sheet. If they can score, they can also concede a goal just as easily.
Definitely, and that was the case with them. They came out very strong. Napoli was quite dominant for the first 5 to 7 minutes. They were pressing forward. They were playing balls over the top. It allowed them to bypass Barcelona's midfield, and as Barca was a bit with a high line, they could target people like Mertens and Insigne who'd run it behind the defense. And we saw that with the chance very early on. Mertens hits the post. And maybe if he scores that goal, the game would be quite different. But Barcelona managed to grow back into the game to get the corner, and Lenglet scores. And from there onwards, the tie completely changes. There's a huge problem in this Napoli side. This team lacks this defensive attributes. They don't have this solidity. Fran, how do you feel about that? What do you think the problem is there?
Yeah, so I mean, we've seen that as soon as Gattuso came in, he's preferred more kind of attacking midfielders in the center, and he's pretty much neglected Alan, who is their sole defensive midfielder, someone who many people in Europe still see as an interesting option, to pick up, very much in the same mold as a Conte, who's able to still pass the ball and retain it. And he's opted for players more like Ruiz, Zielinski, and Lobotka, and that does leave a lot to be done by both Koulibaly and Manolas.
I agree with you, and the team just generally doesn't have enough to protect their center backs with. And with the first half, with the corner chance, we saw that in the in the box, there wasn't enough presence to actually challenge for those headers. And Longley comes in, he absolutely destroys Mertens and gets at the end of the ball, scores.
Mhm.
And then after that, we saw this dominant Barca side that this is how Setien would actually like his team to play. You mentioned Messi was playing a lot forward, more forward. How do you feel that incorporates with the style of play and gets the best out of Messi?
Yeah, so one of the interesting things that people might not have noticed is, Messi has always played traditionally in the right wing position, right? But where exactly he starts on the field is actually quite key. Obviously, when he was a young player, he was able to dribble from deep, and he has those famous goals where he's dribbling through entire defenses. And, while he did sort of recreate that somewhat today, he does still start off a lot higher on the field. And that's supported by the fact that Semedo pushes forward. Kike Setien really recently mentioned that he wanted Messi to start a lot higher on the pitch because Messi shouldn't be the person dropping deep. He needs to be the person who stays up top and actually has the support. And it comes down to the fact that Semedo pushes forward. But ultimately, as you said, it did also give Napoli the chance to attack and counter.
That's what it is. It's like that side was a bit out of shape, and you could see Semedo going forward. And with his pace and physicality today, he's making 70-yard runs, dribbling two team. I think it's the kind of player that actually Barcelona invested so much money in. Confident, powerful, driven, and someone who wouldn't lose the ball. But the problem is when you make a 70-yard dash, to come back those 70 yards is quite difficult, and to constantly do that over the course of 90 minutes can be difficult for a player. And that is where I feel Roberto was supposed to be, on the right central midfielder, who would drop into that position, sort of lacked that discipline and did not, as we know this player can do it, but today there were gaps in the beginning, and had the game not turned over in Barcelona's favor, it might have been the place where Napoli would have striked.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's a thing in football where you can't tactically be cognizant of every sort of gap that you create on the field. Every kind of attacking move you make is going to leave defensive gaps, and for Barcelona, the payoff is so much more because you get to have Messi be at lethal positions, and that's always going to be a net positive over anyone else on the ball in the opponent side, and I think that's certainly how Kike Setien sees things as of right now, and they have to rely on Messi because he is their best player, and they have an aging squad that isn't as dynamic as the old Barcelona sides.
Agreed. And that also, while you know when Messi is so high up the pitch, it puts a lot of fear in the players' hearts. We saw with Zelensky and Deme, they were quite deep. Normally, they like to be quite up on the pitch, um, cover the flanks. They move a lot. They're very free. They're allowed to move. And but today, with Messi being so high up the pitch, there was this natural tendencies to look back and be worried that he's going to do something, which meant that they couldn't play their own tactics well as well. And we saw how phenomenal Messi was. He had a disallowed goal. You could say it was harsh, but the rules are touched his hand. But he was on fire. We saw it last night with Ronaldo being on sublime form. It feels like those guys, even that they're not in the same league, they sort of push each other to create these performances. And it's quite a shame that they are reaching the twilights of their career.
No, and that's the thing, really. I think one of the issues with Barcelona is that, unless you have Messi basically pulling the strings for most of the game, there are these kind of sort of drops in sort of attention and also just dynamicism, I think. And the second half effectively showed what happened because obviously Napoli goes into the half. I mean, they're 3-1 down, but they have a little bit of momentum, right? And they sort of start the second with a lot of pressure. They are able to keep and retain the ball versus Barcelona. And that's something you would never really expect a traditional Barcelona side to give away, possession. And yes, you could say that this Napoli side didn't really have what it took. You always need to do something with your possession. And I think players like Fabian, unfortunately, you saw he had a clearer chance, for example, maybe to just take a shot when he was on the opposite end of the pitch. He decides to move backwards. So it does tell you that Napoli don't have those kind of like firing guns in the midfield. And they resorted instead to a lot of crosses. And it showed you that, a reason why Milik needed to be on the game much earlier. As soon as he came on, he had the offside goal. But it showed you that, Napoli had 6 crosses, effectively, most of them coming from the second half. And that's pretty much what they were praying for. It's something that Roma actually did versus Barcelona and were very successful with when they made their famous comeback using Dzeko. And, I think Napoli had to adapt slightly earlier, given the fact that they had a big lead to kind of chase. And they didn't adapt fast enough.
I agree, and I feel like there's a mental side of this as well. Like Napoli, we've seen this team come quite close to winning the league, but dropping off at the crucial point. And even today, as we mentioned in our preview, Napoli likes to take shots. With likes of Fabian Ruiz, Zelensky, Insigne, Mertens, they tend to take several shots a game, more than 3 at a time. But with Ruiz, he's running on goal, and yes, the ball is on his weaker foot, but you don't get many chances like this against a side that is Barcelona. So we can even talk about the side that maybe it wasn't just tactics, it's just the mentality of players that they sort of crumbled under the pressure, I feel. And that's going to be, for Barcelona, you can say, yes, they were great, but that's also sort of let off. The next, the contenders, the competitors they're facing are going to be Bayern Munich. And that is a side that is ruthless. We saw today as Hansi Flick, he was fuming when Odoi scored a goal. It was offside, but he was fuming that his back line did not capture the run that Odoi was making. And for him, it doesn't matter if you're winning 5-0 or 1-0. It's like mistakes shouldn't be made. And that kind of Bayern Munich side coming in against Barca, Fran, I feel it's going to be quite tough. What do you think?
Yeah, we're going to preview this game much more in depth, but ultimately it comes down to the fact that this game is going to be a complete restart. It's not going to be the fact that Napoli is chasing a game and they're going to play and go for an attack. I think Bayern play, they don't play with the low block, certainly not, but they press very, very hard, and that's completely different to what the Napoli midfield presents you. And I think players like Rakitic, if he's going to start again, that's probably going to be an ill-conceived decision. I think Puig needs to start. He's much more dynamic and he's able to actually retain the ball. And you need to really start on the front foot versus this Bayern side. Otherwise, you're just going to lose and succumb to the pressure, really.
Agreed. I feel the talents and dynamicism of these young players is what needs to be on display against Bayern Munich. It's the only chance they really have. These experienced players are great, but it's just they don't have the legs to compete with Bayern Munich.